Hey, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. I am Ron Luce, joined tonight by the one and only Joe Maris. We're here to talk about a weekend of Cubs baseball. But before we get into all of that, Joe, how are you doing, sir, on this fine Monday?
Good. There's no Cubs baseball on today. Just focus on Monday Night Football and get back at it tomorrow.
Absolutely. So, like Joe said, it is an off day for the Cubs, and we're doing well, sir. Good evening to you as well, Dope Redbeard. We're doing all right, man. It was a good weekend, I think, for the Cubs in general. Obviously, losing on Friday night, Juice and I got on the mic and talked a little bit about that one. Saturday, a little bit of another heartbreaking loss. Obviously, the Brewers coming back and ultimately winning it in the eighth inning. Kind of the story of the series, really, is how it felt. Good signs, though. Ian Happ hits another home run. Willie gets to 20, I think, given all the time he's missed this year. And just the year that it's been, I think that's a nice personal milestone for him. And then obviously on Sunday, not only a big win, but Patrick Wisdom, as you know, your official Cubs rookie home run record owner. After hitting his 27th three-run bomb that ultimately gave the Cubs win in Sunday's game. So overall, I think all things considered, pretty good weekend. Cody jumping in the comments, 9-8 in September with 12 to go. And for those that maybe don't understand, if you're an avid listener, I know you know what that means. But Cody said a 500 September, and it's looking really good. And I think we can sit here and say that it's going to be interesting, too, down the stretch, and we'll talk a little bit about tomorrow's game. But you got 2 with the Twins. You've got a bunch of games with the Cardinals. I think it's 7 games with the Cardinals in the last 2 weeks. And then you mix in 3 games with the Pirates. So 500 looks really good right now. Like, based on all things considered, it looks really good. But Joe, I want to turn it back over to you really quick because I want to know, obviously we're talking about multiple games today, taking advantage of the off day. What was, I guess, the biggest storyline to you over the course of the weekend? Obviously, there's a lot. We're going to touch on as many of them as we can. But to you, what was the biggest one? Was it the Wisdom home run, or was there something else that stands out more to you?
I think definitely the Wisdom home run, but we'll probably touch on that a little later. So I'll go with just the fact that it's been a storyline for about a month or two. The Cubs have been pretty resilient, especially late in games. They're not always turning into wins.
Mm-hmm.
They're just falling short, but man, are they just fighting tooth and nail, and they're getting themselves in every game. I have some friends who are not Cubs fans that like to troll me when I say the Cubs are not quitting, and then they'll end up losing. But that's not the point. The loss does not matter. It's the fight that counts right now, and I'm really happy and encouraged with what I see from there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that I think everybody knows it's happening, but it's just not being talked about, right? Like, everybody's, this team's fun to watch. They don't quit. Like, everybody can say the general statements and it's fine and dandy. But like when you actually sit back and like you said, and you kind of think about it and go, you know what? This Cubs team doesn't really quit. And, that goes back to the culture, which we've discussed, at length here at Cubs on Tap, and just how they're playing and these guys competing for jobs. And like, it actually makes it fun to watch baseball right now for the Cubs because despite what's going to be a losing season, that's already confirmed, like, they're still enjoyable. There's still something there to watch. And like you said, there's something there also to build on in the future, right? With, this kind of no quit attitude that they've built in that clubhouse. And I think that is a really good key that you bring up because it kind of leads into some of the points of the weekend, right? We touched on Ian Happ's 23rd home run in Saturday's game. Wilson Contreras' 20th of the season as well. 2 guys that were here from the start of the season that, with a team that had aspirations of effectively winning a division at one point in time. And really up until that freaking no-hitter, they looked like they were going to potentially win the division. And now, you sit here and you're like, that's good for those guys, though. Like, they're still producing. Happ obviously been on fire since halfway through August, effectively. Wilson's had a tough year in terms of average, but the power's been there all year for him, which is good to see. Like, there's enough storylines that have really kind of risen to the forefront. And you mentioned, obviously, we're going to touch on the Wisdom stuff, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But you and I discussed before we jumped on, Joe, a little bit about some of the pitching over the last 2 days. Obviously, Steele started Saturday's game. He went 4 innings. I really think the only gripe I have outside the long balls that he gave up is the amount of walks. He had 4 walks in 4 innings. He also had 4 strikeouts, though, so I guess he balanced that out a little bit. But, then Alzolay comes in, pitches a pretty good 3 innings. And then in Sunday's game, Keegan Thompson starts for the first time since he returned from the IL. Nico Horner also returned in Sunday's game. I completely forgot about that.
Right, yeah, that David jumped
worth mentioning as well. It kind of feel like it flew under the radar a little bit. But again, it was Sunday. Let's be honest. Very few people in the Chicagoland market were focused on baseball in general, as the Bears were taken to the field at Soldier Field. But I think it's encouraging. And what I'm trying to sum up here is, with the pitching, is despite maybe not the best performances from guys like Steele and Thompson, it's still nice to see them get back out there and do some good, right? I mean, it's ideally you wouldn't like to see Steele's walk numbers that high, but overall, not a bad 4 innings from him. And then, Thompson, despite not striking anybody out and allowing 2 free base runners, really limited the damage that he saw in his 2 innings. Only 1 hit, no runs. So overall, I think he did pretty well too. So, Joe, and this can be for the whole pitching staff too, right? Because obviously there's guys in the pen that had shaky weekends, that we can talk about too. But I guess what was your thoughts, and how did you feel about the pitching this weekend? Because again, 2 guys that we've talked very heavily about in the second half as potential starters for the future. I think a lot of us probably feel more Steele than Thompson at this point, but nonetheless, they're both getting an opportunity to start. So what say you about the 2 young starters for the Cubs this weekend?
Steele has basically been giving us the same outing over and over and over again. It feels like there isn't much of a decline, but there really isn't much of an improvement. So I'm not coming away from this season feeling any different about Steele than I did after his first start. There's still optimism. I'd say more optimism than pessimism or whatever the
pessimism.
Pessimism, yeah.
You're right.
But he's still lacking a little bit of the more strikeouts, just maturity. I just feel like it's a little bit of more maturity. I mean, he's still a rookie, so it's not something that you want to worry about crazy, but it's something that's on your mind going into next season. But with Keegan Thompson, I think what we've been seeing out of him, even before the injured list stint, is pretty alarming as it pertains to starting pitching.
Yeah,
his strikeouts are just almost non-existent. The velocity is a little down. Whether that has to do with the way he attacks as a starting pitcher compared to relieving, I don't know. But I think it's pretty alarming seeing what Thompson's done as a starting pitcher.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point because it seems like when he comes in out of the pen, he's strong. And he's not necessarily elite, but he's strong, right? Like he'll give you 2 innings. He might walk 2 guys in those 2 innings, but he'll probably strike 2 or 3 out as well. He'll balance it out a little more for the free base runners he gives up. But I agree with you. Every time he's started so far this season, it really does feel like he just can't get command of his stuff enough to really like get guys to whiff and, that swing and miss. He gives up a lot of free base runners. I think that's been his biggest issue all season, even when he was coming out of the pen. He doesn't give up a ton of hits, but it's those walks that I agree with you are very concerning because let's be frank, as a starting pitcher, you can't give free base runners. You know what I mean? And I agree with you, I think, on Steele. And I think what might benefit Steele, and this is where kind of my optimism lies, because you mentioned obviously more optimism than pessimism. To me, it kind of lies right now with the whole idea that like he's got an off season to work in the pitching lab and go into next season as a starter, right? Obviously came into this season as a relief arm. They used him out of the pen. He was dominant out of the pen, granted. But I think it'll be really interesting to see for him when he has a whole spring training to prepare as a starter. He has a whole offseason to prepare as a starter. And then he has a whole offseason also to work with Hottovy and the Cubs and in that pitching lab as a starter. I think he can come into next season and then start taking those steps of improvement that you were hoping to see. I think we were all hoping to see as the season wore on. I agree with you. At least I think a silver lining is he hasn't regressed really. He's had, I think, really one like bad start in his last 2 or 3 outings. I think that was just against the Giants because he just got hit. But, overall, I definitely feel better about Justin Steele as a starter going into next season than I do Keegan Thompson. And I think a lot of people probably share in that sentiment, as it seems like you do as well. So, but in addition, speaking of guys that, again, we are very much focusing on 2022 at this point. Let's be honest. We have 12 games to go, like Cody noted. 4 of which are happening this weekend, the doubleheader on Friday, and then the 2 games with the Cardinals then on Saturday. Sunday is originally scheduled. But we have an off day today. off day on Thursday, and only 2 games with the Twins tomorrow. So we're winding down. We're thinking about 2022. While thinking about 2022, there's a handful of names in that bullpen that I'm really thinking about, Joe. Cody Hoyer's one, had a really good outing yesterday, clean inning, didn't strike anybody out, but didn't walk anybody, didn't give up any hits, did his job, got through the inning. All things considered, exactly what I want to see out of a guy like Cody Hoyer. I'm not expecting him to be Craig Kimbrell and strike out the side every single time. You know what I mean? Like, if he's the Kyle Hendricks of relief pitchers where, like, he's not going to strike out a ton of dudes but not going to give up free base runners, I'm here for it. But the guy that's concerned me a little bit in this series, and I think it's because it happened twice. I wasn't so worried about the first time. But seeing it happen again to him in a high-leverage situation concerns me, and that's Rowan Wick. Because he's looked dominant at times. And again, all things considered, the dude just pitched for the first time this, like, August after not pitching since the prior September. So all things considered, I'm not that worried about him. But I think it is a little alarming that one game he'll, strike out the side and get a save. And then in 2 very high leverage situations in this Brewers series, again, against a very good team that, the Cubs are going to be competing with for the NL Central next year, ideally, assuming how the offseason goes. As Cody likes to say, free agency pending, I think is a good way to put it. I'm a little concerned that he got lit up twice against the Brewers, right? Like, I'm not so worried about Friday because obviously, all right, shit happens. Guys are going to get hit every once in a while. But then he comes back out in Sunday's game and gets hit again for another 2 runs. And I think that's where my concern lies because this is a guy that really could be the closer next season. Like, I don't see how he's not unless somebody comes out of the woodwork in spring training and just takes that job from him. But again, given that he hasn't pitched in a year, I'm not too concerned. But I think it's interesting that now all of a sudden he's getting hit. Do you think he is, like, maybe tired? Or I guess what are your thoughts on the entire Rowan Wick situation? Because I have some of my own conspiracy theories as well.
I think one thing that we're seeing that maybe he's not used to, and while it may not be affecting him in that specific moment, it's something that may show up later. And that's he had 3 straight appearances of 2 innings. And that's not something that I think he did prior. I'm not positive, but it's just off my memory. I don't remember him, especially doing it multiple times in a row. He went 2 innings, 2 innings, 2 innings, all in the span. I mean, there was some time in between, but you look at that. He went 2 innings, August or September 5th, September 8th, September 12th, all scoreless. Only allowed 2 hits, couple walks, but then you see the appearances after. Next one he struck out the side, like you mentioned, but then you see 2 innings or 2/3 of an inning, 3 hits, 4 earned runs, 2 walks.
Yep, and that was Friday's game,
right?
Yeah.
And then, like you mentioned yesterday, 2 1/3 inning, 2 hits, 2 runs, 3 walks. So maybe he's still fresh into the 2021 season. He hasn't had a backlog of innings. I'm not sure if multiple innings in one game is the best way to utilize them. And I think maybe that's something David Ross is figuring out too. Because Rowan Wick is still he's not like a veteran MLB pitcher.
Right.
He's not, while he's definitely not, wet behind the ears, he's still finding his way. And it wasn't until he came to the Cubs in 2019 that he really showed some dominance.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially now that I think, like you mentioned, he is the guy back there. Yeah. Cody Hoyer is definitely very good, but I think you can play matchups better with Cody Hoyer. Like you're all right, we need you in the 6th inning, Cody Hoyer. We need you in the 7th inning, Cody Hoyer.
Right.
Rowan Wick, 9th inning. I think that's the way they go, and that's the way I would go. So I think maybe it's still a feeling out process, and maybe this is something they talk about after these next 12 games.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually, you know what, Joe? I'm actually glad you said that because it kind of was in line with what I was thinking, but for a different reason. So I was thinking, okay, hey, this guy hasn't pitched. He didn't get a ton of time to really rev up like you normally would as any pitcher, let alone a bullpen pitcher, you know what I mean? But just any pitcher in general, you usually have the spring training and you have, plenty of time to get ready. He effectively got ready in like 2.5, 3 weeks, of just like rehab stints essentially in Iowa and in South Bend, and then he came up. But I like that you said that because I didn't want to say I forgot about it, but it didn't dawn on me in the moment, right? Because I'm like, maybe he is tired. Like maybe he's just worn down because he didn't get the proper time to get started and they used him a lot. But then I didn't even remember. He went 3 straight outings with multiple innings. And I agree with you. I think that is something Ross is figuring out with the pen because we've seen him use, and this is something I mentioned with Juice on Friday, is like we've seen him use various pitchers in various roles in the second half of the season. And what I mean by that for people that are listening is like you said, for example, Cody Hoyer sometimes will pitch in the 6th inning to get them out of a big spot. Like maybe they just took the lead, the starter's out of the game, and they're like, hey, we need a shutdown inning right here. Cody, you're on. Versus, hey, Cody Hoyer, you're coming out, you're getting the save tonight, effectively, right? We've seen him in literally everything from coming in a jam in the 5th inning to like closing a game in the 9th. We've seen him in every inning that you could possibly see him in. But like Rowan Wick has always been at the back end of games, but it has been a lot of those like he'll come in the 8th, go through the 8th, come in the 9th, close it down. And maybe that is really just him gassed of like, dude, I'm not a 2-inning pitcher. And like you said, I think Ross has to figure out what guys he can use for more than 1 inning and what guys he can't. I think Cody Hoyer's a guy he can go 2 innings. I think we all feel pretty confident in that. But I agree with you, Joe. I really do think Rowan Wick is more of your old school prototypical closer in the sense of like you use him for 1 inning and you only use him for 1 inning. Like,
especially, his pitch mix is basically fastball, curveball. Mm-hmm. We've seen him flirt with that cutter that seems really, really nice, but his bread and butter is that fastball 12-6 curveball. Right. So that's not something a 2-pitch mix is not bode well usually for multiple innings.
Right.
That's why you see starters with 5 pitches.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this just came across my mind talking about the bullpen. Dylan Maples, gone.
Yeah, he's done. The experiment is over. That's right. See, like there was a lot that happened this weekend that just like slid under the radar. But that is a good point because let's be honest. I know Juice even said it on Friday night when Maples came in and didn't look any better than Wick did in that loss to the Brewers. Like, when was the experiment finally going to end? And it feels like it finally has ended. If it wasn't going to end 12 games before the end of the season, it surely was after these 12 games. But yeah, that is something to consider, right? Because now that's another free bullpen arm. Obviously, they use that roster spot to bring Horner back. But, maybe we do see with the, the expansion of the rosters, maybe we do see another bullpen arm come up from effectively the minors because, double A is done now. Single A at both levels in A-ball is done now. Pretty much yesterday was like the cap of the minor league season outside of Triple A, which has that kind of extended 10-game schedule now. But it is just it's kind of nice starting to see that like what they truly have for 2022 in Japan, right? Because like I think we all confidently can sit here and pencil in Brad Wick once he's healthy because he looked fantastic this year. And the limited action he got, he pitched 25 games or something like that. Yeah. Rowan Wick and Cody Hoyer are like the 3 for sure names. I'm like confident in saying like they're in the bullpen next year,
right? And
then you think maybe a guy like an F. Ross can make it. I think he's shown a lot of upside. He's sure he got the loss on Saturday, but like he's a guy that's shown some upside. Juice and I agreed that Trevor Meagle is probably not on the team next year. But there are some guys in this pen that are like, I would consider them on the borderline. Like to me, Manny Rodriguez is a guy on the borderline for next year, and not in like he's gone out of the organization or he's with the Cubs. I'm thinking like he's either in AAA or he's here, right? Like there's going to be a lot of those guys too. So it is kind of nice though that they're even with just 12 games left, they're not like, hey, we're just going to throw Maples out there for 12 games because we don't care. It's like, fuck it. If we can get rid of him and let somebody else get the opportunity, we will. And I think that's good. I think that's a good organizational direction that they have now too, because Lord knows the pre-Theo Epstein Cubs would have just trotted out Maples 12 more times this season and then let him walk in at the end of the year and just effectively let him take away an opportunity from somebody else who is going to be with the team next year. So I think that is good to see as well. But yeah, man, this bullpen is an interesting thought process, I think, going into next year. And I actually, you know what? I am going to pose this question. This is, I'm sure, something we're going to debate maybe ad nauseum come this offseason, and maybe not ad nauseum, but at least we'll discuss. But I want to hear your thoughts right now, Joe, because for some reason, Adbert Alzolay is elite coming out of the bullpen. Elite. I mean, ever since he's come back from the IL, he'll come out of the bullpen. He'll give you 3-4 innings. I mean, we saw that 4-inning save on the Steele start back in Minnesota. Pretty much, I think that was his first appearance after coming off the IL too. Like, this guy has been so good out of the pen. Like, does he just profile then as like an elite bullpen arm? Or do you think I personally, just for sake of clarification, I think he still gets a chance to start next year. Don't get me wrong. But if you were David Ross and you were Jed Hoyer, would you be willing to be like, hey, Adbert, you're going to be our elite multi-inning guy out of the pen? Or do you think this is just a, hey, they want to conserve innings, he'll start next year type thing?
So it's a tough situation because there is no clear-cut multiple inning situation that arrives on a consistent basis.
Sure.
That's what happens when there is a bad start, a 2-inning start. That's what happens when in the 6th inning, the other team scores 10 runs, stuff like that. Right. That's why if somebody's so good at it, you have to use them. And in a case like that, and when that multiple inning situation arrives, he may not be ready to pitch or okay to pitch that day. Mm-hmm. So that's why I would hesitate. But I agree with you that I think he'll get another shot in the rotation, and I'm convinced that he can stick in the rotation.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're able to do multiple innings out of the bullpen, I mean, it's not so different from starting, and we've seen him do really well. His strikeout numbers are very good. And just like I mentioned with Steele, maybe it's just some maturity. Limit the walks, limit the home runs. Obviously, that's the key to winning games. But you have to just limit it to an extent. Obviously, it's never going to get to 0, but you have to limit it enough where you can keep yourself in the game. I think we all see that he's not going to become a top-of-the-line starter. That's fine. You still, just like I say with Alec Mills, you need to fill out a back end of the rotation.
Sure.
And it's tough because you saw Mike Montgomery, who pitched very well with the Cubs in his time. I pitched very well out of the bullpen. I need a rotation spot, or I'm not going to play. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. He left. They traded him, part because they just weren't willing to give him that rotation spot permanently.
Mm-hmm.
But when somebody in the rotation would go down, the first guy in was Mike Montgomery. And that's what we've seen with Alec Mills for a little bit. But now I think Alec Mills has definitely cemented himself in the rotation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough. It's hard to pencil in a multiple inning pitcher that, like, out of the bullpen that's super effective because you're limiting the spots you can use them.
Right.
So it's tough. If he can become more consistent in the rotation, he's going to be on this Cubs team for a long time. And,
sure.
And that's the key. It's tough because there's just no clear answer because you can't have an elite multiple inning guy out of the bullpen. It just doesn't fit because you just can't use a guy in multiple innings multiple times a week.
Right.
Consistently.
No, I don't know. And I wanted to play a little devil's advocate because I wanted to see what your thoughts were on that. But I agree with you. I think wholeheartedly, like, Adbert's for sure in the rotation next year, and he gets every opportunity. And I think he will be a great pitcher. I think for him, the key this offseason, and even for Steele too, right? Like, for Steele, I think it's just understanding how to use his all 5 because he hasn't used all 5 pitches since 2019, right? Because obviously he didn't pitch in 2020, and then he came out of the pen mostly in 2021, so it was just a lot of fastball slider. Once in a blue moon, you'd see him throw that curveball. Like you said, he was a true bullpen pitcher, just using his 3-pitch mix and getting after it. Now, you've seen him use the changeup a little bit. We've seen him use kind of that sinking fastball that he has. He's using those other pitches that he has in his arsenal now. And I think for Steele, it's just a matter of learning how to use them and work his 5-pitch mix. I think for Adbert to me is the epitome of a pitcher that can really thrive as a starter on 3 pitches. He just needs to learn how to throw a changeup. And I think we've seen him kind of work on that a little bit and hasn't totally aced it yet because we've seen the flashes, right? He's thrown some changeups in games where you're like, oh my God, like if he throws that consistently, he's going to be nasty. I think that's the key for him. And then just throwing the lefties. So like I think it gives me a lot of comfort, I guess, for lack of a better term, knowing that these two guys who are, at least for 2022, obviously this narrative can totally change by the time we start talking about 2023, but at least for 2022 are going to for sure be in the rotation, probably as like your 3-4 starters. They have a plan that they need to work on going into the offseason. I think that's key, right? Like, you can identify what they need to do better and what they need to work on. It's more concerning when you have young guys that are like, you need to work on a lot of shit. Like, we don't know what you need to work on, but you need to work on stuff. At least with them, it's like, hey, if you really just work on learning this and this, you should be good going into next season. So I agree with you. I think Adbert 100% is in the rotation. I had to play devil's advocate because he has been very good in that multi-inning roll out of the pen. But again, I truly think it is just and I think they even said, like, maybe not on the record officially, but like the reports indicated that it was strictly to like manage his innings the rest of the season. They didn't just want to throw him out there and burn him in, the rest of the year for no reason. So I certainly think that's a good thing as well. Yeah, man. I mean, it was a weird weekend. Again, like, I think another encouraging thing, Ian Happ having another 3-hit game on Saturday is something that we've seen a lot of him in this stretch down the stretch now. I think that's his 7th or 8th 3-hit game since like the middle of August. I mean, he's been elite during this stretch. So that's encouraging to see. Obviously seeing Hoerner go 0 for 4 in his first game back doesn't concern me. I mean, the dude hasn't played a ton of baseball obviously this year, but there is one more guy, and I'll even throw this up as my last thought from the weekend as a whole. Matt Duffy has really been impressing me lately, and I feel like he hasn't gotten enough love. And it's a little foreshadowing because I got a little something coming for tomorrow about Matt Duffy. But like Matt Duffy, to me, at least recently, right? We've seen him start playing a little more now. Really, ever since like Andrew Romine was DFA'd, and some of these other roster moves started happening, and obviously he's been healthy again. To me, like Matt Duffy is earning himself a spot on next year's team because he had 2 hits on Sunday. He had 2 hits or 3 hits in a couple games last week. He's been really good in the leadoff spot. I actually really like Matt Duffy in the leadoff spot. I would not be mad at all if they walked into next season saying Matt Duffy's our leadoff hitter when he's in the lineup. And on top of that, he's shown the power a little bit too, finally. Like, he's hit all 4 or 5 of his home runs have come since like the middle of August or something like that.
He hit one in like April or May in Detroit, and then everything else has come recently.
Everything else has been lately. So it's like it really is kind of refreshing to see Matt Duffy perform the way he has, because again, this is a guy that was the rookie runner-up to Chris Bryant in the NL Rookie of the Year voting in 2015. Like, he's a good player. I think he just hasn't gotten a fair shake because of injury, and then obviously just competing for playing time with other guys. So that's my kind of thought, is just Matt Duffy's been really good. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you want to add some comment to that as well, and then Joe, I'll turn it fully over to you then. Do you have any final thoughts as well about the weekend before we go ahead and start looking forward to this Twins series tomorrow?
Right. Just I got some numbers on Duffy. So since August 1st, 143 plate appearances, he's hitting 293. And that's obviously like I could shorten that down and you'll see that number jump over 300. But a month and a half, he's hitting just under 300. The slugging is 406. It's exactly what you would expect, even with those 4 home runs. It feels like a power surge, but it's only because it's Matt Duffy. But the dude is solid, man. Mm-hmm. He has he's basically been average. It is what the numbers say, but maybe it's more intangible what he's been providing. And there's definitely been some more clutch hits, but he has been outstanding. And like you mentioned, he's earning himself a spot on next year's team. I think, unfortunately, he's earning himself a spot on somebody else's team. I think he's not young, but he's not old, but he is a great depth piece somewhere. And I think he knows that. Mm-hmm. Unless he wants to play placeholder in Chicago for another season. But I see him on another team next year, just based on the fact that he can really provide a nice depth to a contending team. Yeah. So that's where I think Matt Duffy's going to end up. But
can I do a tinfoil hat with you real quick before you give your last thought? Because it does relate to Duffy. You know what would piss me off? Because you saying like him being a death piece on a contending team is like makes sense. Why is it that I can fucking see him going to Milwaukee?
Oh, totally.
Like,
I mean, he's like what Eric Sogard was when he was
right. Like, especially if they don't want to pay Colton Wong, because granted, Colton Wong's literally having, like, I think statistically the best season of his career right now in Milwaukee. But like, if they didn't want to pay Wong 10, 15 mil a year, like, Duffy can play second, Duffy can play third, Duffy can play short. And I swear to God, if he goes to Milwaukee and is a Cubs killer next year, I'm going to have a freaking tantrum.
Right.
But that's all I had to say. Because just as soon as you started seeing depth piece on a contending team, immediately my brain went to Milwaukee. And I was like, son of a bitch, if he ends up there, I'm going to cry.
And it would make a lot of sense.
I know, and that's why it, like, immediately I was just like, shit, that would make me upset. But sorry, again, that was my little tinfoil hat take. So back over to you, sir. Enough of me.
Other than that, I don't have much. I mean, Hendricks pitched what, Friday?
Yes.
He has had a rough stretch, to say the least.
Yeah. Do you think he's checked out?
I don't think so, because I don't think Kyle Hendricks is the guy that checks out. I just think he's going through something. I don't know what it is. He was having himself a real nice stretch for a while there. And the second I tweeted that I said he is elite, which, like I mentioned, I have some friends that are non-Cubs fans. They've been throwing that in my face every time Hendricks has been back on the mound recently.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
I think the offseason is going to be his friend. So I'm not fully concerned, but it's something to think about.
Yeah, it really is. And just to add to that note, we will talk about Hendricks a lot on tomorrow's show because he's Wednesday's starting pitcher. He's now 14-6 on the season, I believe is his numbers here. Yeah, he's still 14-6, but that ERA I think is the biggest key, right? Because there was a stat that the Cubs shared on a broadcast on Marquee. This is probably a month ago at this point. Don't ask me why I remember this ridiculous stat. He hasn't had a season over a 4 ERA since he was at Dartmouth. Like that, but again, like that's how crazy good he's been ever since he like kind of reinvented himself in college and kind of got his shit straight. This will be the first season because there's I don't think physically any way that his ERA gets below 4. He's at a 41 right now. But like I think that's the biggest concern with Kyle this year. It's just like the home run ball has not been his friend. And obviously, yes, he had a bad April. That obviously has something to play with it too. But like, because like you said, from my recollection, like June, July, and even into like early August, I think he went like 10 straight starts with like at least 6 innings and was like really, really, really good. And then it just seems like lately, like I don't know what's happened. Maybe he is just gassed. Maybe it was just one of those years because of all the kind of the mental warfare I think the locker room had with the press because of all the extension talk and things like that. But I agree with you. I think the offseason is going to be his friend. And you would hope at least on Wednesday, especially against a really shitty Twins team, that, he can go out there, maybe get that 15th win. And that would at least be a nice little feather in his cap saying, hey, we sucked this year, but I still got us 15 wins. Like, pitched well enough in 15 games to get, 15 wins, especially because we've seen the Cubs team this year where, like, guys will have a great start and they just don't get run support. You know what I mean? So that's certainly something to keep in mind. But I agree with you, buddy. I mean, a good weekend, I think, overall, things considered. Sure, Milwaukee's the better team right now. Of course, they're going to, take 2 out of 3. I don't think any of us are surprised by that. But nice seeing Wisdom get the record, nice individual performances from a handful of guys over the course of the weekend. And I think the Cubs can feel good going into these last 12 games. And, we'll start with the next one, though, because that's how we do it here at Cubs on Tap. And we'll go ahead. We'll look forward to tomorrow's game. So tomorrow, if you're listening to this on Tuesday, it's today's game, but we're recording on Monday. So tomorrow's game is a 6:40 Central Daylight Time start at beautiful Wrigley Field here in Chicago, Illinois, between the Minnesota Twins and the Chicago Cubs. If you're in the Minnesota network, I know our boy Dubs at Mike Dubs Radio is in the Minnesota market. So if you're like Dubs and you're listening or watching the game, you can listen to it on WCCO 830, which is an Odyssey station, or the Wolf 102.9 FM, or TBIN or twinsbaseball.com. And then you can watch the game at Bally Sports North, and then your usual suspects in the Chicago, 670 The Score, WRTO 1200, and Marquee Sports Network. Griffin Jax, what a name. is on the mound for the Twins. He's 3-4 on the year, 6.65 ERA, Wolf, and 54 Ks for him. And on the mound for the Cubbies, Joe, I feel like you're obligated to be on the post game tomorrow because Alec Mills is on the mound. He's 6-6 on the year, a 4.50 ERA and 78 Ks. Again, for those that might be confused by that joke, I'll have to do the check. 95% sure though, Joe's been on like the last 6 recap shows when Mills started the game. So it's a fun little inside joke here for Cubs on Tap. So Joe, I'll turn it right back over to you, buddy. Again, a really not so good team in Minnesota for the next 2 days for the Cubs. It all starts tomorrow against Griffin Jacks. What are your thoughts on the game? What are your predictions? And who's your fly the W pick before we go ahead and wrap this thing up?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I am definitely obligated to be on tomorrow's show. I love me some Alec Mills, but just like you mentioned with Kyle Hendricks, this Twins team is very subpar, even more subpar than the Cubs team. And at least the Cubs team, I don't pay attention to the Twins, but the Cubs have some, I don't want to say momentum because they're not winning, but they go into every game feeling like they can win it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if I get that same vibe from the Twins. So I'd like to see Mills do just like what we've been seeing recently, just have a great pace on the mound and get into the 5th, 6th inning. And sometime, he's been into the 8th this season, so there's no reason why he can't go 6, 7 innings. And that Cubs offense to just keep going. There's no reason. Jax has a 6.65 ERA, and he's a right-handed pitcher, which means we'll see Ian Happ, Ortega, probably Rivas, maybe. Fingers crossed. Yeah, I'm sure. I actually know we're not in Minnesota, but
no.
There's no reason why the Cubs offense doesn't come out swinging like they have been recently. So I'm looking forward. I'm just looking forward, especially on a football off day, just some Cubs baseball. So I'm excited. I'm going to go with Ian Happ. I think like we mentioned, he's still hot, man. He's been hot for about a month and a half. Gets to bat left-handed tomorrow. Just got an off day. I think he's ready to go. I think he puts one in the seats.
I like it. I like it a lot. And yeah, if people couldn't tell here at Cubs on Tap, especially given where the team is and how far into the season we are, our attentions are turned to the sport played with the leather pigskin a little more so than the old baseball. But I agree with you, man. I think it's a good opportunity tomorrow. It's going to be very cool in the city of Chicago tomorrow. It's going to be only, I think, in the 60s. It's going to be very, very, probably the first time it's actually going to feel like fall here in the city of Chicago. I know it's supposed to rain all day too, so I'm actually starting to consider, do they even play tomorrow? Mm-hmm. Hopefully they do, because I agree with you right there. A Tuesday night when there's nothing else on, love me a good Alec Mills start. And I'm looking at, Joe, for tomorrow, exactly what you said in your great article over at www.ontapsportsnet.com about Alec Mills, and that's consistency. I just want to see him continue to be consistent because he gives great starts. Again, if he's looked at as the 5th starter on this 2022 roster, as long as he's consistent, that's great. That's all you need out of him. He doesn't need to be the ace. He doesn't need to go out there and strike out 10 guys every time out. If he keeps you in the ball game, that's all you're looking for out of a 5th starter. So I'm expecting a lot more of that tomorrow. Again, very subpar Minnesota Twins team. Sure, they have guys like Byron Buxton and Josh Donaldson and Sano and Kepler, who are all fairly good players. But I don't think they pose enough of a threat to make me all that concerned about the Minnesota Twins. And like you said, the Cubs offense, despite losing 2 out of 3, Milwaukee was hot. They scored at least 4 runs in every single game over the weekend. So, that's at least worth mentioning. They're not getting beat 6-0 and 7-0. They're losing 6-4 and 8-5 and shit like that. They're still putting up runs. And I fully expect them to do that tomorrow. I'm expecting the wind to be blowing in. So a guy would definitely have to muscle one out. I think Happ can get one out if anybody's going to get one out. But I'm just, for some reason, the universe is telling me Nico Horner is going to have a nice day tomorrow. He's back. I think he wants to go out with a good bang on the rest of this 2021 season that I think even he would admit he wants to put behind him just because of all the time missed with injury. But again, he's still batting over 300. And especially on a day when the ball might not be leaving the yard, he's the type of guy that strikes me that could go, 3 for 4, 3 for 5 with a couple singles and maybe a double. Maybe steal a base and score a couple runs, especially if he's hitting, higher in the order. He'll probably hit 6, 7 in the order. I think that's where you hit on Sunday. I unfortunately closed the tab out already. Otherwise, I would double check. But I think he was hitting 6 on Sunday. So, it'd be nice. I wouldn't even mind seeing him drive in a couple runs. You know what I mean? Like RBI single, RBI double type stuff. I think that would be cool and tough for Nico Hoerner to kind of close out the year. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Nico because I fully expect to see him at shortstop tomorrow. I don't see why we don't.
No, especially after an off day.
Yeah, and especially with the rest of the season, they want to get him as much time as possible. So I literally expect to see Nico Hoerner at short every game the rest of the year, unless he's like that bad against whoever's starting that day. If he's a lefty or something, then maybe we don't see him. But even then, I mean, I would rather him bat over a guy like Alcantara. It's not even a shot at Alcantara at this point. It's just, again, Nico's a part of the future. Like, we're going to see Nico opening day 2022 is probably shortstop unless they sign somebody. So, he's a guy I want to see a lot of. So I'm going to go ahead and take Nico as my flag debut pick. But I do like your Ian Happ pick as well. I think he stays hot. I mean, a three-hit day over the weekend is something that he can certainly be proud of and, continue that momentum into these last 12 games. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before we go ahead and wrap up this show, I do want to remind you, Cubs on Tap is the official Cubs podcast of the On Tap Sports Network. You can go and check out all of our great work over at www.ontapsportsnet.com and at OnTapSportsNet on social media. You can follow the pod-specific accounts here for Cubs on Tap. We are at Cubbies on Tap. That's CUBBIES. That's Twitter and Instagram. I am at Loose on Tap. Joe is at Joe on Tap on Twitter. You can listen, and you can follow all of our other great contributors at Cody on Tap, at Juice on Tap, at Marty Laval, at The Riot 326, and everybody else that does good work here for the Cubs side of the website. You can also check out all of our Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks content. Those seasons are either already in gear. Obviously, the Bears, big win yesterday for them. Go ahead and check out the Bears on Tap, guys. They do a great job covering the team. And Bulls and Blackhawks are right around the corner, ladies and gentlemen. Blackhawks' first game is October 13th. They play a preseason game, I think, next week already. So I think camp opens up this week for them. And I know for basketball, we're getting close as well. I believe their first game of the season is October 20th or 22nd.
I think it's the 19th.
Okay, 19th.
Because it's totally off.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
See? Hey, there we go. Unfortunately, we won't be able to do a Cubs post game after a playoff game, but that's okay.
We'll save that for next year.
Yeah, we'll have some fun with it nonetheless. But make sure you're following all those other great groups. They do a good job covering their respective teams. And yes, again, Cubs fans, as always, Sox are going to make the playoffs. You have friends that are Sox fans. Go ahead and direct them over to our friends over at Sox on Tap because they do an excellent job covering the Southsiders, who are actually playing right now. I don't know who they're playing, but I know they started at 5:40.
They're playing the Tigers.
There you go. They're playing the Detroit Tigers. So once again, www.ontapsportsnet.com, at OnTap Sportsnet on social media, the OnTap Sports Network. Go ahead and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Joe, always a pleasure, my friend. Cubs off day, so nothing going to happen between now and the time anybody listens to this, but the Cubs are back in action tomorrow after losing 2 of 3 to Milwaukee over the weekend, but no big deal. Wisdom gets the home run record in Sunday's win. And now we go ahead and beat up on the Twins, hopefully for 2 games before yet another off day on Thursday. We all get to take a deep breath before 4 games in 3 days with the dreaded, awful, horrible, boring St. Louis Cardinals. So, Joe, what do you say, buddy? We get out of here the only way we know how to here at Cubs on Tap.
Yep, let's do it. Let's go Cubs.
Let's go Cubs.